Hi, Joan.
Anna, did you recover from your vaccine?
Finally, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a while.
Goodness.
Yeah, both Jimmy and I were under the weather.
Yeah.
It always affects us that way. And my dad is like, "How are you, Dad?" He's like, "Oh, I'm fine."
Uh-huh.
It was not
Was it a vaccine or was it a booster?
booster.
Booster? Goodness. Yeah, my booster, I expected to have trouble, but I didn't.
Oh, that's good.
Hmm.
Yeah, we had fever and
Goodness.
all kinds of puniness.
Yeah.
Trying to get my photos in order.
Yeah.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, Scott.
Oh, that's
It's
Jimmy.
Jimmy.
Oh, that's Jimmy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I didn't see Jimmy. Oh, there's Jimmy's name.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello. Still trying to get used to this new computer.
I feel like the Secret Service people because I got a brand new phone and I can't get half the stuff off of it that I needed.
Oh, no.
I mean, I kept, it said it's going to sync it, but it didn't.
Oh, no. That's
I
not
go,
good.
"Okay." Yeah.
That'll work, right? Back over here.
Scott, where do you live in the neighborhood?
Yeah, my wife and I are on Gladeview.
Good. Oh, here's my alarm telling me not to forget.
The alarm for this meeting? Looks like you made it.
I've got the worst memory. I have to set alarms for everything.
You and me both. I'm just like, oh my God, what am I reminding myself to do now? It makes you appreciate how full your calendar is though when you do that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Scott, have y'all lived in the neighborhood a long time?
Yeah, a few years now. We bought our house in the end of 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 3.5 years now.
Yeah.
First time joining this group meeting though.
Good.
Oh, that's cool.
Glad
Glad
to have
you
you.
could come.
Sure.
Very glad to have you. Yeah.
Hopefully the DSD will be able to address some of the concerns that we've had about the losing trees.
So whereabouts in the neighborhood are y'all then?
Well, I'm in the southern part. I'm sort of between Jones Road and Stastny Lane.
Yeah.
So,
And Jimmy and I are
usually one of the-
Red and Jinx.
Nice.
Should I-
All right.
It's like, who's gonna be in focus? Better.
Yes.
yeah, they had a thing on TV the other day about how to improve your background for Zoom. And I went, well, I ought to do that someday, but I don't. You got a pretty good background on yours, Scott. Yours just sort of fades out.
Yeah, that's kind of the easy one, just blur.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I added some, but there's not many. Oh, there's the labyrinth.
Labyrinth.
Oh, yeah, that looks nice.
The better. blur.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the labyrinth that Jimmy and I created at St. Elmo Elementary School.
Oh, nice.
Anna's taken some classes on doing labyrinth.
So, yeah, Mr. Mack, the principal, that's what they call him. He said that the kids are really getting a lot out of it. So I think that was definitely my goal, but it's great that they're actually being able to help them to focus and with some of the stress, Oh, there's Carrie. We should close the blinds. Let's go. Hey, Carrie.
Hello, how are y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks.
Oh, she thinks I'm talking to her. Siri, I'm not talking to you. She's like, I'm happy to be here. It's like, but you're not really here. What on earth?
It's like, what is that?
So Jimmy installed his light today, Carrie, the desk, the magnifying lamp
Yes.
that we picked up from your porch.
Yeah, it worked out great. Thank you.
Wonderful, I'm glad y'all are enjoying it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I told Jimmy, I was like, I don't know, should I be worried about Carrie? Because she's getting rid of all her like crafts and stuff. And it's like, if I got rid of my crafts and stuff, I would have to be committed.
No, I'm actually helping some people downsize and they have a lot of craft stuff and one of their requests was that I try to find people that, would be able to use everything. So
Oh, very cool.
this group has really been helpful in that.
Yeah, you had everybody excited about the stuff you've been posting.
That's
So y'all,
awesome.
we're talking about the Buy Nothing group that we belong to on Facebook. And so Carrie's been posting a lot of really cool stuff.
Oh, great.
It's been fun.
Hi,
Hi,
Jeff.
Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
Hey, good evening, ladies and germs. Here. So who's got the first round at this beer joint?
DSD.
Oh, okay.
That's who Daniel's with.
Yeah, well, I've met Daniel. We've talked, we've conversed a couple of different times. So email and actually in person. So they did a couple classes at one time that was very interesting. So wish I could get back to that. So
Fighting the sun.
well, you're so bright. I mean,
See it on the face, is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
get Jimmy the leg breaker to go out there and fix it.
He did.
All fixed.
So that's Jeffrey's joke. because Jimmy and I always go everywhere together because we're partners and in crime. And so Jeff is always saying that he's my bodyguard or my chauffeur. So that's why he's calling him the leg breaker.
Or she'll go, here, hold my beer while I take care of this. So
Yeah, we don't have any people. Disappeared. I don't, because of the background thing. If we had a green background, if we were professionals, we would have a green background. And then it wouldn't do that.
Joan, are you taking a nap?
No. Nope, I just didn't do much to get ready for the meeting, so I'm not letting people see me.
Okay.
Hi, David.
You, Joan.
Hey, David, are you back in town?
Yes, for now.
Oh, good.
I'll be gone again in a few weeks.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
So if y'all are able, if you can go into the participant list and edit your names and just put if you're part of Southwood after it, or if you're with like David, if you could put like City of Austin or DSD. That way, when I have the roll afterwards, it's easier for me to know to keep attendance. Because it matters, especially at our next general meeting, we're going to have an election, and attendance matters because there's stuff in our bylaws that you have to attend so many meetings to be able to run for office. So where do you live, Julie?
I live on Richmond Avenue.
Oh, cool.
Where are you?
I'm at Jinx and Red.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, on the other side of the railroad tracks there.
Jinx and Brad. I'm on your side.
Oh, you are. That's right. Richmond is in the back. So we put a sign back in the Richmond part of the neighborhood because
Yeah.
we started putting one back there a few meetings now because we
Yeah,
felt
there was
like.
one at Bannister and Red.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
there's one there, and then we've been putting one on. Is it Richmond and
Yeah, it's like a dead end.
Yeah.
Cul-de-sac over there.
Oh, by,
where that new
Yeah.
construction is?
Yeah.
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 We've been putting a sign over there because we felt like that part of the neighborhood kind of got neglected.
Nice. Just so you guys know, I have to drop at about 10 to 7.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Let these batch of people come in and we'll ask them to edit their names too. Hi, y'all. So we're just asking folks to go in and go to the participants list and edit their names. And if you haven't done that before, you click more and rename. And if you could add, if you're part of Southwood after your name, or if you're with another group, if you could put that, because I know that we have some of the city council support staff that are going to be joining us this evening. Speaking of, there's Donna.
Got Missy's horse there.
I'm in the car, so that's why I don't have my video on.
That's where you got your horse show.
Now it's just a horse parked at Whole Foods.
So we were just kind of sharing with each other what intersection we're near if we're in Southwood.
I didn't give my cross street. I'm at Richmond and Philco.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh, you want us to put it in the chat?
Sure, that would be great. That way, when we start, it'll be there in case anybody shows up late. There's Ken.
Actually, it's 6:30. I don't know if we want to start anytime soon.
Well, since there was still some people coming, I wanted to give them a little bit of a cushion.
Yeah.
Because Ken's trying to join right now.
Please go into your.
There we go. All right, we'll let Ken connect to audio and then we can get started. Well, I don't know. Daniel, is David here yet?
Yeah, David had some technical issues. I'm actually just going to cover the environmental part as well. I'm familiar with the rules, and so
Oh, okay, cool.
yeah, so I'll just handle both parts of the presentation.
Okay, so you just will fly solo. All right, cool.
Yep.
Alrighty, so I guess I'll go ahead and start the meeting. So this is the Southwood Neighborhood Association general meeting. We meet every other month, and on the opposite months, the officers meet. And tonight we're just going to go straight into our guest, which are which is, should I say, going to be Daniel Priest. And he is with the City of Austin Development Services Department. They're going to be discussing the roles and responsibilities of their team, the Austin Tree Protection Ordinance and erosion control measures currently in place, which I thought were really important topics, especially since we have Williamson Creek that runs right through the middle of our neighborhood. And sadly, some of our neighbors have lost their homes to buyouts. And so I know that erosion control is really important, especially with the folks that live directly on the creek and the tributaries that feed that. So I'll go ahead and Daniel, let you take over. You have the option to share screen. So that should be already set up for you.
Great, thank you. Let me
You're
go ahead and do that. I've got a PowerPoint here. Know when that pops up for y'all. Okay, I see some thumbs up, so I'm gonna and that means we are in good shape. So thank you for inviting us or inviting me to come talk. I'm going to basically try to get through what really deserves 5 or 6 hours to talk about in as little time as possible. So what I want to do is I'm going to run through. First, we're going to cover the trees, Austin's tree ordinance, the substance of those tree regulations, and then we're going to pivot from there and talk some about the kind of general like erosion control and general environmental controls. These are all things that DS kind of fall within DSD's wheelhouse, and something that we put a lot of effort into keeping our community just as safe and as the environment is functioning as possible. So yeah, I'll go ahead and dive into it. So I work for the city arborist. I'm an environmental compliance specialist senior, and work mostly with kind of rule development, some review. Before I was in this role, I worked in inspections. I was a tree inspector on site, so I've kind of seen it from both sides. I also I'm a board certified master arborist, and I worked on the private sector here in Austin for about a decade before coming to work for the city. So kind of seen everything, seen it all from all angles. So when we talk about tree regulations in Austin, we were primarily talking about Austin's tree ordinance. So Austin has one of the original kind of comprehensive tree protection ordinances anywhere in the country. If y'all are familiar with Hoffman Oaks Park, it's this little pocket park right across from City Hall there on Cesar Chavez. It's actually named after Margaret Hoffman, who she was a city council member in the early 80s. Real interesting character. She was an environmental activist, among other things, and she is who is really responsible for pushing our tree protection ordinance through. And the tree protection ordinance is reflected in our land development code. So I'm going to refer to a couple of things tonight. I'm going to talk about code, and you're also going to hear me talk about rules. And so what I want to start off here is kind of delineating what is code and what is rules. They're related, but they are not the same thing. And that's something that I think kind of trips people up sometimes. So in Land Development Code 25.8 is where it lays out all the tree regulations. And the main things that you want to think in terms of is that the code prohibits the removal of a tree above a certain size. It kind of varies on the site. We'll talk about that in a minute, but prohibits the removal of a tree. And by removal, it doesn't just mean you come out and you cut it down with a chainsaw. It can also mean you damage the root system, you overprune the tree, you do anything that is going to reasonably lead to the death of the tree. And that's something that's really important about Austin's ordinance, and what really kind of sets it apart from what the regular, kind of like the national norm was back in '83 when this was passed. The fact that it really acknowledges that killing a tree isn't just killing it right now. Killing a tree is doing anything right now that's going to lead to the death of the tree. And so removal is prohibited. And then it also creates the position of the city arborist and empowers the city arborist to create rules to protect trees, identify actions that constitute removal, and generally here's how you protect trees. And in those cases where we authorize the removal of trees, it says here's how the rules are going to specify how you provide mitigation. Whenever I use the word mitigation and whenever I'm talking here, what mitigation means is the idea that, okay, you have removed a tree that is taking away something from the urban forest. Now you have to do something to make up for what you have, taken out of the urban forest. Most of the time that takes the form of tree planting, but there are some other options there, and we'll get into that. But when you hear me talk about mitigation, that just means you've removed a tree. Now you need to make good for that, kind of make the urban forest good. So I always like to kind of pause and acknowledge why we protect trees in the first place. We're limited on time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Trees benefit the community. They benefit us as individuals. Their presence by itself improves human health. They provide a lot of cooling for the city. They provide a sense of connection to history and to nature, both kind of writ large with things like, the treaty oak or the auction oaks downtown, or even just like the tree in your neighborhood that's been there, longer than any individual house. Like there's a real continuity that comes from trees in our community. And so that is why we go to such trouble to protect them. So We protect based upon the size of the tree. So when we talk about the size of the tree, we're talking about the diameter of the trunk of that tree. And so this kind of will show you what the different levels of protection are. So when people talk about a protected tree as a category, they're usually talking about this 19 inches and larger. Those are protected. Those are regulated trees anywhere in the city of Austin. The size down from that is 8 inches and larger. Those are regulated when you're on a site that is controlled by a site plan, commercial site, apartment complex, anything like that, anything that's developed under a site plan. When you're talking about single family neighborhoods, those trees are not regulated. So in those neighborhoods, we're only looking at 19 inches and larger. We also have a separate category called heritage trees, which is for certain species. When they hit 24 inches, they are subject to a higher level of protection. It isn't that we protect them differently, like all the rules around how to preserve the tree are the same. It doesn't distinguish between the regulatory category. It just means that if you remove the tree, there's a higher level of mitigation, and authorization to remove the tree can be a kind of a more of a hurdle than on some of the others. So you don't protect a heritage tree differently than anything else, but authorization to remove it and then mitigation if it is removed are going to be higher than on the others. So that's the main difference there. That's probably the last time we're going to mention heritage. So I just want to ping that distinction. So questions we often get, are hackberries protected? How can you protect a hackberry tree or invasive trees? And so the answer to this is it is only about the diameter of the trunk, right? It is the protected status is not determined by the species in any way. The way that we deal with things like invasives, hackberries, trees that are considered undesirable, is that in the case of a tree such as a hackberry that's very prone to structural problems, there's a category for authorizing removal that is dead, diseased, or imminent hazard. So they would be assessed based on their condition, right? But we don't give a blanket authorization for removal just based on the species. With certain trees that are kind of invasive, that are non-native and can harm the urban forest, we have a list of those in our rules, and those are ones that, again, they are protected. All protected means is you cannot remove it without a permit. Once we verify the species, for the purposes of the permit, then we will tell you, yes, you can take it down. So they are protected, but just because it's protected doesn't mean it's impossible to do anything about it. It's just there are certain rules that need to be followed to make sure that we're not, cutting down live oaks and calling them ligustrums, which is a thing that will happen, because if you're just looking at a stump after the fact, it can be a little more challenging to figure out the species of what was cut down. So measuring trees, generally speaking, you're going to measure at 4.5 feet off ground level. Although if it branches there, or if there's weird swelling in the trunk, then you're going to drop down below that and measure at the narrowest point on the trunk below there. We're trying to get a good representative, kind of a sense of the size of the tree relative to others. Industry standard is 4.5. That's what's in code. But depending on the configuration of the tree, there may be some circumstances where the more appropriate measurement is elsewhere. Multi-trunk trees, for example, you measure the full value of the biggest trunk, half the value of all the other trunks. And then trees have not gotten the memo about how they are to be measured, and so they grow in ways that don't necessarily facilitate that a lot. And so, depending on the configuration of the tree, sometimes need to adjust where things are measured. Here's just some examples. This is an image we pulled out of our rules. So we've measured the tree. So the measurement of the tree is going to give you a inches, kind of a measurement in inches that is the diameter. So if you're wrapping a tape measure around the tree, you would measure it and you would divide that number by 3.14. So you get your diameter. And that diameter is the basis of all of our regulations. If you go back to the slide from earlier, that's going to tell you which regulatory category your tree falls into. The other thing that we use that number for is that number is used for determining the size of what we call the critical root zone, which is the area of roots around the tree that have to be protected if the tree is going to survive construction. And so that number, it's kind of a magic number. We get it tells us, if you've got a tree that is 20 inches in diameter, you have a circle around your tree that is 20 feet in radius. So whatever the diameter inches of the trunk, that is going to give you your the size of your critical root zone. So when we talk about the critical root zone, it is what it says. It is not the entire root zone. Entire root zone is going to be 3 to 4 times the size of the critical root zone. Critical root zone is the critical part of the root zone that needs to be protected if the tree is going to survive. And so we have this image right here can be a little misleading because it shows these terraces. That it's what it's trying to illustrate is that the closer you to get to the tree within the critical root zone, the higher the level of protection. And we'll talk some more about that later. But when I've mentioned a few times damaging the root system. And so there's a lot of things that can happen that can damage the root system. And this is tied directly to the biology of the tree and kind of how the roots grow. So I think a lot of times whenever people picture a tree, we've all seen like a picture where there's the above ground part of the tree, and then there's the root system which kind of mirrors it. It goes way down beneath the tree, goes out about as far as the edge of the canopy. And you should forget that. That's not what trees actually look like. The image I always use, I saw this at a conference sometime, and I've used it ever since, but is a picture of a wine glass sitting on top of a dinner plate. The stem of the glass is the trunk, cup of the glass is the canopy, and that dinner plate, which goes way, way, way past the edge of the wine glass, that's actually your root system. So the other thing about that dinner plate relative to the wine glass is that it's very shallow. It only goes, it's not very tall. So when you're looking at a tree, the things you want to remember is that root system goes way out past the edge of the canopy. And it's also, most of the feeder roots of the tree are going to be in the top 10 to 12 inches of soil. So, sometimes, people say, well, I didn't trench that deep. We only went down 12 inches. And like, well, that's all it takes. Like that's where most of the action is. So, so whenever we talk about how we protect trees, it has a lot to do with the specific biology, kind of the anatomy of the root system. And so some of the things that can damage this would be trenching. So anything that's coming through, a physical damage, to the root system. People do this for irrigation lines, drains. Other things that can damage would be vehicle compaction. So whenever you look at that soil profile, one of the things those feeder roots really need is they need air. Just like you and I need oxygen for respiration, trees need oxygen for respiration. They don't have a respiratory system. They have to absorb all of their oxygen locally. There's there's little openings all over the tree called lenticles that they use to absorb oxygen for their cells. But underground, they need pore space, right? There's, ideal soil is about half open pore space, and the rest of it is either mineral or organic content. But whenever you drive a front end loader back and forth over that soil over a period of days, or you've got people walking on it in the mud all day long, what happens is that pore space slowly gets compacted, and there's no more air getting to the roots. And so that's why we have fencing. That's why why we do things to prevent traffic on top of the root system. You can change the chemistry of the soil with concrete washout or leaching. You can damage the roots by putting fence posts in. There's a lot of things that can happen on a construction site that damage the tree. We collectively call these impacts. An impact is anything that has the potential that is going to damage the tree or has the potential to lead to damaging the tree. So most damage to urban trees is the result of development. The number I've heard tossed around sometimes is like 85% of the damage on our urban trees, or 85% of the mortality on our urban trees is directly related to like construction, development, that kind of thing. Oak wilt, hypoxylon, all of these things, they don't hold a candle to people, right? Like we are responsible for most of the deaths of urban trees just because of the construction, the needs of construction, and just not knowing what the impacts are going to be. So in the city arborist program, what we do is we review plans. So if somebody wants to, if you've got a tree on your site and you're proposing to put in a development, those plans have to be reviewed by our staff to make sure that it is compliant with our rule or our preservation rules. Make sure that nothing that happens on that that construction site is going to lead to the death of that tree down the road. And fortunately, we have there are pretty good national standards. Arborists have been paying attention to trees in cities for a long time and have developed some pretty good rules of thumb for how to make sure that your trees are going to survive. So Austin's rules are not any kind of an outlier when you look at best management practices and, you know, kind of the stuff that the International Society of Arboriculture puts out. I mean, we're pretty right down the middle. Like it's pretty standard stuff. So it's not, you know, it's all based in what is well-established arboricultural knowledge. But the way that we apply those here is we have what are called tree preservation criteria. And these are kind of our big picture items that we're looking at whenever we're trying to determine if a tree has been preserved or not. And that's the language we use around it, as we say a tree has or has not been preserved. So, you know, even if the tree is still standing on the lot, we would say, well, your proposed project does not meet preservation, is the way we talk about that. So that would require mitigation, or that would require some adjustments to the proposed plans. So the first of these criteria we're looking at has to do with the overall square footage of the critical root zone that needs to be preserved. So you picture that big circle we talked about that with the radius equal to the diameter, radius in feet equal to the diameter in inches of the trunk. Well, within that circle, you have to preserve 50% from impacts. And sometimes surprises people just because even though it's the critical root zone, it can actually sustain some damage and the tree still be fine. Trees are really resilient. So I've got 3 circles here. Now, these are not all compliant. These are not all things that if they were proposed on plans, we would approve. So the red area here would be the impacted area. The white area would be unimpacted soil. So you can see over here on the left, we've got our 50% impact. By square footage, that is the maximum that would be allowed. Now, we're going to look at another criteria which limits how close you can get to the tree. So this one would not actually be approved, but just kind of as a starting point. So here in the middle, you can see like what 30% impact would look like. You've got a house up top and maybe you've got a driveway going in on the bottom, and that adds up to about 30%. And then here on the right, you've got this trench here. And so the 2 structures may not add up to more than 20 or 25%. But if you run a trench right here, you are severing all the roots right there. And so everything on the far side of that trench counts as impact. And so there are, you know, you can take steps to use air gun, something that can dig a trench without damaging the roots. And then you run your utilities under that to avoid this level of impact. But, you know, just like illustrating, whenever you do something that is severing roots, every root on the other side of that kind of point is considered impacted, because it's, you know, once you've cut through the root, it is no longer able to transport any of the stuff that the roots are supposed to transport. So our second criteria, like I said, has to do with how close you get to the trunk. And so we have a second circle within the first circle. It is the half critical root zone. It is not half as important, it is twice as important, but it is half the radius. So you can see here with some different scenarios how this might play out. So here, in this one on the left, you got 20% impact, and in this one, they have worked around the half critical root zone. This might have been kind of a notch kind of cut out of the wall of the house. This could be a scenario where they have floated they've elevated the foundation over the half critical root zone right there and just anchored it kind of in the what we would call the full CRZ area. There's a lot of ways you can do this, but that's, you know, that is kind of when you combine the first criteria with the second criteria, you get some of these. Here in the middle, this is what 50% impact looks like when you account for the half critical root zone in the middle. So instead of half the circle being red, you got this white circle in the middle, and then you got I think it works out to like 60 or 70% of the big circle around. And so that's what you would be allowed to impact in this scenario. And then here on the right, this is an example of how not to do it, but it's something that still see, particularly on commercial sites, a lot. So the half critical root zone is half the radius, but it's a quarter the area of the entire circle, right? And so if you protect right at the half critical root zone, I think a lot of people hear half and they think, well, that's 50%. So we've protected half of the CRZ. But you have actually over impacted the area of the kind of around that. And so this is a scenario that we see a lot of people trying to be compliant, but not actually meeting protection goals. So anytime you see a site where fencing has been run like, it seems kind of close to the tree and it's just like in a circle around it. That may be a scenario where the contractor has run their fence at the half CRZ line rather than thinking in terms of preserving 50% of the area. And finally, the last criteria we have is that no more than 25% of the live canopy may be removed. I don't have an equivalent diagram for this one, but basically there is a certain amount of, you can do some pruning, you can take branches off, but beyond a certain point, the canopy is where all of the energy in the tree starts from. Sometimes people will say things about trees like, well, by pruning it, we're, reducing the demand on the tree. And that has it exactly backwards. All of the energy in the tree starts in the leaves and moves down to the rest of the tree. That's where photosynthesis happens. And so when you start pruning branches off of a tree, you're essentially cutting the tree's income is a good way to think of it. And so you do too much of that and the tree's going to get into a cycle where it's, just the demands of staying alive and growth and all is never going to keep up, is never going to be able to keep up. And so you put it into a spiral that it's not going to come out of. So those are the basic criteria. The tree, every tree is an individual, just like people, they all respond to construction stress and other stress in slightly different ways. We never know exactly where the roots are. Critical root zone is an educated guess. It's a very well educated guess, but it's still an educated guess. And on urban sites, you can a lot of times have historic features that have caused the tree to grow in unusual ways. And so there's a lot of ways that the actual trees kind of in the field are going to differ from kind of the idealized tree that you would be looking at when you're just looking at a plant set. And so we do have some, we have options for kind of how to account for those differences. We don't have enough time here for me to kind of run through all of those, but we do have ways of working around that. We can also require tree care plans. If a tree has been over impacted, but it's, in our judgment, if somebody takes care of it and addresses those impacts, tree is still going to survive. So it's not the case that as soon as you go to 51% impact, for example, your tree is a lost cause. Like there's a lot we can do to kind of work around that and to, we can accommodate unusual sites or sites that have particular challenges in some different ways. When that can happen, we talk about mitigation. So I referred earlier to mitigation. Generally speaking, mitigation means you have to plant replacement trees for the tree that you cut down. There are situations where the mitigation requirements are such that you cannot plausibly plant all the trees that need to be planted back on the site. So when there is a site that can't support the required mitigation, what happens instead is that you pay into we have a tree fund that is used for planting trees kind of in public spaces. That basically you pay into that in lieu. So you have to, it's not the kind of thing where you can just opt in to paying instead of planting, like you do have to plant, but we also don't necessarily want to, turn like a regular small residential lot into a tree farm just to meet mitigation requirements. That's not good. That's not in the long-term interest of the urban forest. And, it's better to get some new trees planted in parks and such. Mitigation requirements are basically based on the diameter of the tree. There's a few kind of some adjustments we'll make based on condition or species of the tree. Again, not going to get too much into all of that here, but just be aware that we do kind of tweak that based upon some different factors. The starting place is always going to be 1 inch for 1 inch. So everything kind of gets adjusted up or down based from there. So it's not the case that you cut down a tree and you plant one tree. It's you remove 1 inch and you replace 1 inch is the way to think of it. We have dead, diseased, or imminent hazard trees. Per code, we do not require mitigation for those. This is a tree that is in really rough shape. It's posing a threat to a house, posing a threat to people, threat to the public. Those can be removed without mitigation. City arborist does have to verify that it's dead, diseased, or imminent hazard. That's one of the review categories that I handle is looking at dead, diseased, or imminent hazard trees. And this is like if you're just a homeowner and you just have a tree in your backyard that is dying. This would be the kind of most of the time this is the category you would be going for a permit for. So in terms of review, we review So anytime somebody brings in a building permit application, there's a question on there that asks if there's a regulated tree on the lot. If you answer yes to that question, it gets kicked over to our group for review. If you answer no to that question and you have a protected tree, you are setting yourself up for a world of hurt down the road, because that can end up requiring you to stop in the middle of the project and redesign around a tree that you didn't flag at the beginning. So yeah, always want to make sure you answer yes if you've got trees on or regulated trees on or adjacent to your property. There are a few categories that is, so we would call that integrated tree review. Basically, it's just part of the overall building permit process, and so it gets distributed automatically. There are a few areas where you do not need a building permit, but you still may have to pull a tree permit though. So those would be things like if you're a plumber, like your plumber's doing a repair on a sewer line and needs to go through the root system of the tree, they need to know that they need to pull a separate tree permit addressing the fact that you're impacting the root system. If you're doing something like pouring a driveway or a walkway within the critical root zone of a regulated tree, that's not something that would normally require a building permit. Flat work doesn't require permits, but if you're doing it near a tree, then the tree itself triggers a tree permit requirement. So just be aware of that. Here's what that looks like. No need to really dig too much into that. We also review for site plans. So anytime somebody brings a site plan in, one of the requirements for that is that you have a landscape sheet that details kind of the existing landscape conditions and then what that's going to look like at the end of the project. And so our reviewers are kind of integrated into that process in turn. And then site plan exemptions, not something that most people are going to deal with. Did want to say a little bit about dead, diseased, or imminent hazard trees. Like I mentioned earlier that the fees are waived. Something that will come up sometimes, this is kind of lined out in code. The city arborist is the one who has to make a determination that a tree is dead, diseased, or imminent hazard. So if you have a private arborist who's looking at it, we definitely review arborist reports and put some weight on them. But at the end, but it is not the case that we necessarily always agree with them. And so at the end of the day, it is the city arborist who has the final call on that. So just be aware of that, and be aware that even if the tree is in rough shape and needs to come down, it does in fact still require a permit. If you've got a situation where you have something that, like a tree that has split and is actively threatening, it's not like it's going to be dangerous in a month. It's dangerous right now. What you can do is you or your arborist can contact us and just say, here's a picture of the tree. We are proceeding with removal right now because it's literally going to come down on somebody, and then file the permit retroactively. We do need to track that, but if it's truly a life and death situation, then we don't want to hold you up for 2 weeks to waiting for a kind of review turnaround. Let's see. So inspections, I'm gonna skip over this because whenever I get into the environmental stuff, that'll cover inspections as well. And so finally, enforcement. The main thing to remember about this is it is a Class C misdemeanor to remove a protected or heritage tree in Austin. We have inspectors who can and do write citations. In addition to the citations, you can also be hit with the mitigation requirements on a removed tree, which can be actually considerably more expensive than the citation itself. So always pull permits. Don't cut anything down without a permit, and let us know if you see anything coming down in your neighborhood that looks kind of shady, or looks like it may not be permitted, or you can't find a permit if you check online. And then something else that comes up a lot is people will call us kind of about issues between neighbors' trees. We don't get involved. The city doesn't regulate kind of tree issues between neighbors. That's just something, but basically the only reason we would get involved is if the tree in question is regulated, and what is proposed to happen is going to be more than 25% of the canopy. But we would not get involved just because your neighbor's taking off more than you would like, or there's some dispute about what you may be obligated to prune. If you have a tree that's grown onto your neighbors. We always recommend hiring a certified arborist, but it's not any kind of official regulatory requirement. And then if you're planting trees, just make sure you check with Austin, check Austin Energy's recommendations. We don't want to be putting shade trees right underneath power lines. It's going to be bad for the tree, in 15, 20 years, and it's going to be expensive for the utility. So just bear that in mind if you're planting anything. So that is the end of my section. Let's see where we are on time. Pretty good shape. So I'm going to jump right into the erosion controls. This shouldn't take as long as the tree section. And then we will, I'll try to leave a couple minutes in case there's any questions. Y'all can enter any questions also in the chat. And you can also, this is my email address. So if you've got anything that you want to ask that you think won't fit into the meeting, feel free to just reach out to me here and just mention that you saw me in this meeting, and I can answer any questions you've got. So environmental inspections. So our environmental inspectors cover a lot of ground, and they fill a lot of roles. So they're responsible for checking compliance with tree requirements on both residential and commercial sites. General permit inspections, this would be things like Google Fiber putting in lines, or like any kind of capital improvements. They handle general environmental enforcement, so this would be things like discharges into creeks, anything like that. They handle our music and entertainment, like the sound ordinance, and then underground storage tanks. So that is our inspections division. Keeps pretty busy. So we have different. This is kind of what the different territories look like. This is for residential versus commercial. You can actually, if you're trying to find who the environmental inspector is for your area, this is actually available on DSD's website. As you can find that if you're trying to figure out who you need to contact. Also, I recommend just contacting 311 because they can forward any complaint to the appropriate party. So they environmental inspectors cover. Like I say, cover the entire city. So anything with a building permit or a site plan has an environmental inspector on site at least once a month, monitoring, making sure that erosion controls are in place, making sure that tree protection is in place, monitoring for discharge off of sites. So they handle all permitted activity is going to be visited at least once a month by the inspectors. They are also out there doing pre-construction meetings, kind of helping, kind of making sure you're compliant on the site at the beginning of the thing. They're handling kind of calls that come in about different sites. And then they're conducting final inspections just to make sure that the finished product is compliant with what was required by the plans. And then they also will sometimes pull in folks from other departments or other divisions to assist with more kind of specialized knowledge if that's necessary. And then I think I also mentioned they're out there writing citations and such whenever there are illegal tree removals. So we talk about the abbreviation we use for these is ESC, so temporary erosion and sediment control. And this is basically the different ways that we keep dirt off of on construction sites, out of our roads, and therefore out of our waterways. That is, runoff pollution associated with development is a huge problem, both for our sewer system and also for our creeks, for the river, sedimentation. I've definitely, you've probably seen the pictures of what Barton Springs pool looked like 20 years ago versus now. Like there's just, and a lot of that comes from a lot of that just comes from kind of just there is more runoff happening than there used to, just because there's so much more development. So the environmental inspectors are the ones who are tasked with staying on top of that. So these ESCs are the different measures that we have for keeping dirt on sites and out of streets. And so you'll see these are going to be installed at the perimeter of the site. So we've got mulch socks, silt fence, the sediment filter dikes, rock berms, stabilized construction entrance, and then water quality controls. So you've seen these mulch socks. Again, I'm not going to get really into the details on the proper way to install a mulch sock because this is more just for information, kind of a general information. But you should see these should be overlapping. You shouldn't see gaps between the socks. They should be there shouldn't be holes. There shouldn't be mulch leaking out. The stakes should be, pretty close to each other. They're 2 feet apart, kind of offset on either side of the mulch is the proper way to install it. Any deviation from that can lead to discharge from the site during a rain event. And it's one of those things where it is the little details that make all of the difference. So this here on the left is actually not installed right, because it only has the stakes on one side of the sock. Properly installed, you would want these kind of staggered back and forth on either side. That's going to do a better job. So you can see actually here on the right, that's a better job of installing your mulch sock. You'll also see silt fencing, and a lot of times the specifications for which of these are appropriate really vary by the slope of the site and the size of the site. So they intercept the stormwater and debris in different ways. So the silt fence is pretty standard. I mean, I think we've all seen these on construction sites around. There's some specs for how you're supposed to install it, just to make sure that nothing's getting underneath. If you're looking at a silt fence and you can see an air gap between the fence and the ground, that silt fence is not doing its job. That's something that needs to be fixed. You can see kind of what these look like installed. Yeah, this one on the left has not been buried. That is not correctly installed. One on the right looks pretty good, although they may need something else on that driveway. And then for something like that driveway, we'd be looking at something like a tri-dike, which would be, again, is just another way of controlling offlow from the site. Let's see what these look like kind of in the field. Again, these are a little more appropriate in situations where with a silt fence, you've got soil underneath you. With these, you might put these on like a driveway, someplace where you're not able to kind of sink stakes to hold the silt fence up. Then you've got your rock berm is another way of doing this. Rock berm is going to intercept a lot of sediment. They need to be kind of redone and cleaned out periodically. You can see what that looks like. Usually contained by like a wire mesh or something similar to hold it all in place. And then stabilized construction entrance. This is one. Basically you shouldn't be. Trucks are going to be on and off a construction site. All day long. They're going to pick up mud from the site. That's inevitable. So the question is, how do you keep that mud out of the street? Stabilized construction entrance is the answer to that. You've got that big bull rock, those big chunky rock that you'll see on a construction site, and that rock is there as mud gets on the truck tires and it rolls over that rock. The rock is supposed to knock the dirt off of the tires so that it doesn't get out into the street. Is the idea there, and so these have to be kept. Basically, as sediment builds up, they may need to be redone, kind of come in and put new rock or clean out the old rock. But whenever they're functioning properly, they should be limiting the, kind of that, you've seen it where you've got a construction entrance that's just got nothing but mud kind of streaked out into the street on either side. And so a lot of times when you see that, it's time for your stabilized construction entrance to get a little bit of a facelift. But that is the idea there. You can see what this looks like in practice. Again, this is just providing a surface that has a lot of friction against the tires and is kind of abrading the tires in a way that's knocking a lot of that sediment off. And we've got some. We also have water quality ponds. And these are, again, kind of depending on the size of the site, where there's a whole lot that goes into kind of just, deciding what goes where on these. And this is an area that I'm not quite as familiar with them as I am with the trees. But if you have any questions about this, feel free to forward them to me. And if I can't answer, I can get it to the appropriate party. And then finally, we're coming back, bringing it all back around to trees, talking about the actual requirements for tree protection. So you want to There's three different forms of protection that we use for trees. The primary one is fencing. We use chain link fencing around trees. We don't allow that orange mesh that they use in some places. It just doesn't keep people out. It doesn't stand up over the course of a construction project. So it should be chain link fence. It should be installed at the line of the critical root zone or at the edge within the critical root zone, kind of basically just outside any area that has been approved for impacts. So obviously, if you've got a building that's coming into the critical root zone, you're not going to fence where that building's coming in, but you would fence kind of the area that has not been approved for impacts. And our secondary form of protection is mulch. We require an 8-inch layer of mulch that is to protect the soil anywhere within the critical root zone that can't be fenced. So, you know, an example of this would be you've got a building going into the critical, you know, that's going to kind of enter the critical root zone. Your fence can't go right up to the edge of that building because people have to be able to walk around the building to construct it. So for that gap between the edge of the fence and the edge of the building where the roots still need to be protected, you would put down 8 inches of hardwood mulch. And that mulch is there to provide, to resist compaction, to protect the soil during construction. So fence is always the first line of defense. We would rather see everything fenced and as little mulch as possible. But mulch is an option whenever there are factors on the site that are going to, you know, require access within the critical root zone. And then the final thing you'll sometimes see is the wrapping of the trunk or large branches with 2x4s to protect them from like physical kind of impact damage. That is only going to be required in situations where, for whatever reason, the protective fencing is within 5 feet of the trunk. That, you know, that wrapping is, it's hard to put in, it's expensive, and it can actually harm the tree if it's left in place for a long time, because as the tree grows out, it can be kind of compressed by the presence of that. Really has to be loosened periodically. And so we don't require it unless there is a specific reason that the fence is so close that you might have like a, you know, a bobcat or something that actually that might accidentally run into the trunk without crossing the fence. Most of the time, if everybody's staying where they need to stay with respect to the fence, they're not going to be close enough to the tree to actually physically damage the trunk. So that's the only case where we would expect to see that. So you can see some examples there. I don't know why they have on this one on the left. It's in the slide deck, but I'm not sure why they have the 2x4s up, because they are fencing is way past there. But so yeah, so some numbers on our kind of inspection and enforcement. You can see how many calls our inspectors are responding to, and how many regularly scheduled inspections they have. They stay really busy. So in terms of whenever there's a violation on an active construction site, that is going to start, they're going to respond to it. If it's not something that is super serious, they're going to start with a verbal warning. That'll escalate to a written warning, and then from there to a stop work order. Although depending on the severity, they do have the option to start with a stop work order if it's something that is significant enough that it has to be, you know, kind of addressed right now. But in terms of the normal, you know, for example, talking about trees, you know, if a inspector goes onto a site and the tree fence has fallen down on a part of it, but there hasn't been an actual impact to the tree, that would follow the standard progression of, we start with a verbal warning, then a written warning, and then finally we would issue a stop work order if it doesn't get addressed. Whereas if you roll up on a site and somebody's running a skid steer back and forth, you know, 3 feet from the trunk, no, that's going to be a stop work order right away. It just has to do with the severity of the impact, and, you know, if the impact is actually occurring, or if it's just kind of you know, a question of the protection not being where it needs to be. So that is, here's the contact information for our inspection group. And again, you also should have my contact information, and I can post that in the chat, and you can always feel free to reach out to me, and I can put you in touch with anybody you need to be in touch with. I am typing that in right now. Daniel Priest at Austin, Texas.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, that'll be really helpful to have it in the chat.
All right, I just posted that. So that's the presentation. I don't know where y'all are at in terms of the other stuff y'all need to handle with the meeting, but I am available for questions, but I want to also respect your time if y'all have other business to cover.
Well, I gave you all the chunk of the meeting, so we streamlined the rest of it. I'm going to hammer through the other parts of it, and then we're going to have some information about our election coming up. But yeah, I'd like to be able to open it up for, so if you want to stop share, and that way we can go back to
There we go. Okay.
big Hollywood Square screen. And that way, if anyone has any questions, either you can either raise your hand or use the raise hand reaction. David?
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you, Daniel, for that presentation. So during the land development code overhaul process, which of course we never finished overhauling the land development code, there was talk of a change to the rules or protections around trees, that when something like this, if a developer accidentally knocked down a tree with a bulldozer, then not only would that developer be required to mitigate, but the development could only happen as if that tree were still in place.
I see.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So where is that understanding accurate, and where are we with that?
So I should say, whenever I was the last time we were tackling, the updates to the land development code, I was a lowly inspector and was not involved in any of the kind of the big conversations around that. So I don't know a whole lot about that. I can find out for you if you want to drop me an email, but it's
Yeah.
there is
Say it
current.
differently. I'm sorry. If somebody nicks a tree now,
Mhm.
And it has to be removed, can they then build in that space where the tree once was?
Right. So what I can say is that right now there's no mechanism by which we would like that would be kind of a formally blocked off area, if that's what you're talking about.
Gotcha.
The one issue that I have seen some people run into is when a tree, so for heritage trees above 30 inches, there is for those to be approved for removal and mitigated per code, it's supposed to go through through a commission. It has to go to the Environmental Commission and then planning. There's not a mechanism in there for taking a tree that has already been removed to the commission to get mitigation assigned. And so that has kind of been a thing that has resulted in some some delays for folks in the past, I know. But in terms of any kind of like formal restriction on it, there's nothing like that.
Okay, thank you.
David, the District 5 and Kitchen's office has been looking at that issue. We've sort of called it the ghost tree issue. And it came up during a zoning case where a tree was removed with a permit under the understanding that it was impacting a structure, but then the structure was soon after demolished anyway. And that caused a lot of concern within the office and also with some of the surrounding neighbors about sort of how the process was played. And so we've continued to have conversations to see if we can look for ways to improve the code as it relates to trees. And I'm hoping we're working with Keith Mars and his crew to, find any other gaps this might be a good opportunity to sort of, improve the code. I think another question, Daniel, that we've been talking to you guys about is that mitigation around tree removals. And my understanding is it currently doesn't apply to infill lots, that it applies to subdivision rules.
In terms of if you remove the trees, you have to mitigate.
Yes.
So the mitigation applies across the board, both in infill and elsewhere. I think the infill exception is that there's not a separate from the issue of mitigation. Whenever you're in new developments, there is a requirement for landscape planting, like you have to plant 2 trees. There's no requirement for that in infill.
I see.
And so the only way that the city can require planting on an infill site is when there's mitigation required. If a lot just didn't have a tree that was removed and there's nothing to mitigate, then there's no mechanism for the city to require planting. So it's only mitigated sites with mitigation that have those in an infill context.
So, Anna and all, if we're able to sort of identify some improvements with staff, we hope you all will be supportive of improvements. I think we've got pretty good rules on the books, but there are some gaps. And we also hear some of the challenges around enforcement. And so I think we'll be looking at that aspect of it as well. And the ghost tree concept is part of that enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Does anyone else have any questions? Jeff?
Hey, Daniel, what are we doing on oak wilt right now? There's several of them in our area that we've got an extensive amount of oak wilt going on.
Right.
And, I haven't heard much lately as to who's doing what to whom and some of the other things, because I'm concerned since I've planted several oaks in my yard to replace trees that have passed on, that I don't want them affecting my trees. But,
right, for sure.
They're still quite a ways away, but it travels pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure. So I work within development services. We have the division that's the Community Tree Preservation Division, which there's the city arborist program that I'm part of. And then the other side of the community trees is urban forestry. They're the ones who kind of handle that. We have a urban forest health coordinator who handles that. I'm not in the loop on anything current. I know that position was vacant for a while and got filled. But if you shoot me an email, I can actually forward that and find out what the current, kind of the current state is. There's not any active programs that we're running that I'm aware of, but I can verify that for you.
And one other real quick one, I put it in the chat. It appears to me that there are times that the city seems to think that they don't have to follow the rules when it comes to sediment and those type of things. And Donna, I'd really like to start seeing some enforcement on, they preach one thing, but then they go do as they damn well want to, because we just had a water break around the corner from us. And I mean, the thing is just completely silted up and everything else. But if that happened on a construction site, well, they'd be all over that. So I'd like to see some equal enforcement, Donna, as being part of the rules of engagement. So I said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Are you waving, Missy, or are you just adjusting your screen? Okay. Anyone else? Going once? Do you have any questions, Julie?
No.
No?
No.
So, do you have the number so do we contact you to get in touch with the arborist if there's a tree that needs to be assessed?
Right. So if you were reporting a violation, so you see something going on that needs, an inspector's attention.
No, tree. Okay. So this is like a personal example.
Mhm.
We had some straight line winds couple of rains ago, and our tree topped itself.
Right.
And so right now we're just waiting for the leaves to die so that it's easier to remove that huge. So basically half the tree came down.
I wouldn't say maybe about a third of it came down.
But definitely more than,
Yeah, it's a pretty big.
it's
chunk.
more than 25% came
Yeah.
down.
Right,
Um,
yeah.
And it was the main structure. So who do we call to find out if we need to take the whole tree down or if we just need to?
Right. So in terms of the assessment, you would want to contact a private arborist to come out and make that assessment. We basically, at the end of the day, our job is issuing permits and saying yes or no to permit requests. So the way that would work is, you've got your arborist who would come out, would take it, would look at the tree, would assess it, would say, yeah, this seems like something that, needs to be removed or no. The next step there would be if it is a regulated size tree, if it's 19 inches or larger, then either you or your arborist would submit a permit application. And then based upon whatever was submitted along that with, we would either say, yes, you can, we would approve the permit or we would deny it, just, kind of depending on what was submitted. So we would not do the initial kind of assessment. We would be responding to the permit application.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm looking like a resounding no. Okay. All right, Daniel, thank you so much for sacrificing your evening and coming here to share all this with us. Like I said, trees are important to us. I mean, we've talked about trees before in our meetings, and I actually went to elementary school with Mrs. Hoffman's son, and so she was in my folks' neighborhood, and so yeah, the love of trees was definitely instilled during elementary school, and so we want to do what we can to try to protect them.
Yeah, well, appreciate y'all inviting us here to talk, and I'm very glad to join and talk about trees. Always enjoy that. So I will sign off, and yeah, y'all have a good night.
Thank you. All right. So I'm just going to try to zoom through the rest, this middle section of the meeting, so that we can get to our election committee, and so they can discuss what's going to be going on at our next general meeting. So let's see if I can do this. Forget it. Okay. I'm not going to share screen. All right, forget it. We'll just do, so Jimmy, if you want to share the treasurer's report.
Sure. If anybody has voluntary annual membership dues, you can do so at the southwoodofficers@gmail.com PayPal account. And as far as the accounts in savings, currently we have $1,230.41. In checking, we have $1,423.66, and we've had no expenses in the past month.
And then avenues to get involved with Southwood. We have the Google group, which is Southwood Neighbors, if anyone hasn't joined that yet. And you can just submit a request through there. Our SAD website that needs to be updated. So if anybody does WordPress, we would greatly appreciate any help in updating that. We still haven't found a volunteer to do that yet. And we have a next door group called Southwood Neighborhood Association ATX, and it's a private group, and you would just submit a request to join that. And if you're on Nextdoor, it'll show me that you're in Southwood, and that's how I kind of just can choose who can join, because we wanted to be within the neighborhood. And then on Facebook, we also have a Southwood Neighborhood Association ATX group if anybody wants to use that media. Our next officer meeting will be on Wednesday, August 17th at 5:30 via Zoom. And then our next general meeting will be on Wednesday, September 21st at 6:30 via Zoom as well. And by the way, y'all, we use the same Zoom. There's a number, meeting ID.
ID.
So if you save this one, you'll be able to get into the next general meeting as well. Our next guest for September will be David Trujillo with the City of Austin Watershed Protection Department. And he's going to be presenting the Williamson Creek Flood Risk Reduction Survey results that some of us participated in. And so we'd like to see how that came out and where people are leaning. Are they, wanting to leave things alone? Are they wanting to put in a tunnel? And there was like a couple other options. And so we'll find out at that meeting what the results of that big survey was and how many people participated. And so now we're on to announcements. Joan and Missy are our election committee, and they're going to be sharing with us about our officers election that's going to be coming up in September.
Hello, everybody. I'm Missy Bledsoe, and I am one of the BPs for the Southwood Neighborhood Association. I've also held the office of president and treasurer and a couple of other vice president roles. So as you can see, it's lots of fun because we just keep doing it. But we'd really like some new blood for everybody. We always like to have new people join us and get involved in the neighborhood. So Joan and I are in charge of the officer elections, and we are soliciting right now for people who are interested in running. We've got an email we'll send out that will have a lot of activities and things that we have been involved in with the city in the last, well, I've lived here 23 years, so I know it's the last 23 years. And we've done all kinds of things in this neighborhood. We are a neighborhood that is, very involved with what's going on in the city. I think we're also a neighborhood that's well respected. And we as a neighborhood, we like to be involved and get things done in our neighborhood for the good of the city and good of our neighborhood. Anywho, we have president, first vice president, second vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And you don't have to really have any experience. This is volunteer. We are also not an HOA, so you don't have to worry about people worried about the color of somebody's house or how tall their grass is. You can just call 311. But it's a more of an organization that about community and education and involvement in our city government. So if you feel like you want to run, you don't have to have anybody officially nominate you. You can just say, you know what, I think I'd really like to be involved, and I'll take a look at some of the duties of each of the officers. Anna, I believe, put in to the Google group, right? Did you put that in the bylaws? Did you put the bylaws in the? Yeah. So the duties are in the bylaws of each officer. And so I'll let you read that. And let's see, what else, Joan? What else do we need to know? It's a lot of fun. We meet, like Anna said, we meet every other month in the even months that we are not having a neighborhood meeting. And we usually have lots of fun. There's usually food involved, wine involved, when we have our meetings. And we, and if you're interested in city government at all, or how Austin works, especially if you're new to the city, new to Southwood, this is a great opportunity to learn how everything, just how it works. You know, we do worry a lot about our big elections. A lot seems to be, you know, where most of the people come out and vote, et cetera, but change starts at home. It starts right here in our neighborhood. And as we're all aware, there's lots of stuff going on, and we can make an impact. We can have a say in what goes on. And we'd love to have y'all join us and be a part of a great organization and a great neighborhood.
Yeah.
So just let Joan or I know.
One thing to keep in mind is that Southwood is considered a core neighborhood because we're so close to downtown Austin. So a number of the rules and things that they're putting in place, we have to be very observant of because they will very likely impact Southwood. So that's another reason we need our neighborhood where we can all be watching upcoming rules and regulations and acting as a group to express our thoughts on it. So, and we would love to have you volunteer because it is kind of fun. I mean, I know it's probably been about 15 or 20 years ago, Don Leach came up and said, "I'm sending you in a meeting. Would you like to be a secretary?" And I knew nothing about the group. And I said, "Well, sure." And then I haven't not been an officer since then. So anyway, it's a good way to get to know the neighborhood and things going on in the neighborhood. And please, you can just let Missy and I know if you want to run. We can put you on we're supposed to come up with a group, a recommendation for the group.
So I put
Joan,
the
you're
officer's email address in the chat. If anybody has any questions, that'll be a good landing spot to send them. And then I can forward them to Joan and Missy. And then I also put the Google Doc link in there for the bylaws in the chat as well. Does anyone have any questions about that?
It's on next door as well. What did you say, Anna?
I said if anyone had any questions. No. Don't everybody just knock me over trying to get to the door. All righty. Okay. So that
David's got
Before we adjourn, speaking of elections, not these elections.
I wasn't going to adjourn yet.
Okay. Well, I just have something I want to ask when it's time, and it doesn't have to be now. If you want to come back to me in a minute, I can wait.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it seems that we have a couple of city council candidates in attendance for District 5. And I want to ask you if you think it's appropriate to have each introduce themselves, himself or herself, say a couple of things since they're here.
I think as long as we don't do, what is it?
We can't endorse.
We can't make an endorsement. Yeah. So, yeah. And related to that, I wanted to share some personal news. I have submitted an application that I've told is going to be approved to be the precinct chair for 431, which is the west side of Southwood, west of the railroad tracks. Yeah. So
for a particular party.
Yeah, for the Democratic Party.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm all donkey. Yeah, and I'm not saying that as president. I'm saying that as a personal announcement. Because I can't say that as president. But yeah, I'm a yellow dog, so.
Well, I would like to have the two that are here introduce themselves.
Yes, please. So Stephanie and Ken. If y'all are still with us, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Hi, this is Stephanie Bazan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to say hello. I really popped on just to learn a little bit more. My friend Marion, who's on the call, invited me to join. So thank you for doing that. And just a little bit about me. I'm a native Austinite. I grew up in and around South Austin, went to St. Elmo Elementary and Porter Middle School before it was the Ann Richards School for Girls, and then graduated as a Crockett Cougar. So I've really been in the district for a long time. I'm a working mom. I have two kiddos, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I just want a great city for them to grow up in and to be able to stay if they want to. And so that's really why I'm doing this. I want to see my neighbors not just survive in Austin, but thrive and enjoy all the beautiful things that we have here. So thanks again for giving me a moment to say hello. And Stephanie at stephaniebazan.com. If you have any questions, I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, Ken. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Normally you find me sitting in the back of the room. I guess this would be the electronic version of that, I suppose. Those who don't know me, my name is Ken Craig. I am also running for the District 5 seat on the Austin City Council, because like all of us, we know that our city is best when everybody is fully supported and participating in the cultural and economic and spiritual life of the city. I'll do this really brief thing, and I won't give you the whole stump speech. My priorities to work for will be affordable places to live and do business, improving public health and safety, and protecting our natural environment. I have served South Austin for the last 7.5 years as the policy advisor to Councilmember Kitchen in the District 5 office. I have decades of community leadership and have lived in South Austin for 23 years. I would like to bring my heart, knowledge, and experience to the work ahead, and would be very honored to earn your support.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Thanks for both of y'all for coming in and giving us some of your time this evening. I know that y'all probably have a lot going on your plates right now. God, I can't even imagine. All right, so does anyone else have any announcements? Anything exciting? So Stephanie, this is the picture that's behind us is the labyrinth that we built at St. Elmo Elementary School. We just installed yard signs. Jimmy zip tied them to the fences so that people can see. So if you go over to St. Elmo and you see a big yellow sign on the fence, that's where the labyrinth is located. So that was a really fun project. I'm hoping to do it at other elementary schools. So please.
Oh, awesome. I'll be sure to check it out.
Yeah, please do. It's Mr. Mack really has said that the kids have gotten a lot out of it. And so we're really excited about the project and yeah. Was it worth all the sweat equity?
Once all was said and done, it was worth it. It was a lot of work.
Yeah. That's where all the donated water hoses went.
Yeah.
That I collected off of Nextdoor and Facebook. So anyone else have any announcements? Anything fun, exciting? Jimmy, you have a gig.
I'm playing this Friday. Oakwood Barbecue up in North Austin, Breaker Lane, 7 to 9, if anyone's interested. The Larry Harris Band.
Y'all like the blues, then yeah. And they do have misters, so that definitely makes it survivable.
Yeah, bearable.
Yeah.
Sort of.
All right, well, if no one has anything else that they'd like to share, nothing. All righty, then I guess we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much for joining tonight. I appreciate it. Y'all have a great evening. and Hopefully we'll see you at the officers meeting next month. And please reach out to either the officer email or to, I think Missy put in her email as well. If you're interested in running for office, that would be great. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, everyone.
Save the chat. All right. Ray, you were quiet tonight. Good night.